You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are back. We are doing it. Locked On Wolverines Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Also got to bring in Anthony Treash. We love him from Pro Football Focus. He's going to come and help us break down exactly what Michigan is. But before we even bring him in, I just want to let you know this episode of Locked On Wolverines is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities. Since 1965, McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It is an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, Anthony, I know they're not ranked as highly in the power rankings that you have, but when it comes to overall grade, which I know that's going to be a little bit more of the execution, the things that have happened already, looking back, you still have Michigan, despite the loss, as the number 3 team overall behind just Ohio State and Georgia, I believe, if my memory serves. Why? I think a lot of people right now, a lot of people in the fan base are really wanting for reasons to not kill themselves, I guess, after losing to Michigan State. So when you look at how you've graded Michigan, why is it still ranked so highly even after a loss?
Yeah, I mean, there were some, fluky aspects of that loss. And of course, they did have like a pretty good base built in there. In the 7 games before that certainly helped there since they were still up there. There were some areas that graded out a little bit less than normal for Michigan against Michigan State, specifically with their tackling. I mean, they missed more tackles than they ever had in any other game this season. They're along the offensive line. You had some lower grades, but I mean, overall too, I mean, specifically at the quarterback position, that's what really shined there with Cade McNamara. He played his best game of his career. And then also JJ, he had a nice big time throw in there as well. So that kind of helped some things there. So, I mean, overall, it's still, this Michigan team is exceeding at least my expectations. Because, I remember before the season, I was like, 7 wins, maybe. I mean, that's probably what this team's really looking like. Here they are. They're still 7-1. I never thought they would end up being here at 7-1. To lose in the manner that they did, there's still some encouraging signs to be carried out there. And, a few games of the year, I kind of looked at this team and I was like, this is actually a significantly better team than I thought. It looked like a 10-win team at that point in time. And I think at this point, we're still looking at that given the talent they have. And it's kind of reflected in the PFF grading system, on defense too. Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo, those two graded out exceptionally well for us against Michigan State, just as they have been, for most of the year, specifically Aiden. That's really one of the best edge duos in college football, if not the best edge tandem, with those two leading the way. And that's a good thing, right? Because Power 5 level pass rush matters just because you get the rawness of college football, right? You see it a lot at 2 main positions, along the offensive line and at quarterback. The offensive linemen, they're not, well-oiled machines like they are in the NFL. They're more prone to losses. And then these quarterbacks get, so much more affected and, make worse decisions when they're under pressure in a lot of cases. And when you put some very physically gifted players in the edge, like Aiden and David Ajabo, that's when you get those pass rushers that really do matter to, defensive output as a whole. And they can, explain just as much what happened on a given pass play that coverage can. So going back to the thing there's still, plenty of positives within this Michigan team, even though that there is now a loss in the column for them.
Now, you touched on a couple different things that I want to explore a little bit more because I have a tendency to address the vocal minority in the Michigan fan base, which I know drives probably a lot of people insane that listen to this show, watch this show, deal with me on a daily regular basis. But I still, it's hard, right? When you're in my position to not see a lot of insane things like Cade McNamara cost us the game, or which is a real comment that I got. I don't remember if it was on Twitter, if it was Facebook, or if it was YouTube, because it all kind of melds together after a while. I think people don't realize I get literally thousands of comments that I sift through on at least a weekly basis. So you get insane things like that, saying that the and I might agree with this if they were talking about about tackling Kenneth Walker, but they're saying that the secondary cost us this game, things of that nature. I thought the secondary actually played pretty good against Michigan State, especially they certainly limited Peyton Thorne and those receivers. And when they did, as far as my purview, keeping in mind, I'm on the sidelines. I don't have a great overhead view, but it seemed like whenever he did complete a pass, it was because he was finding soft spots in a zone. What's your eyes on both of those? Cade McNamara flew up, I think, like 4 or 5 points this week for you, all based off of one game. And how do you grade out the pass coverage at this point?
Yeah, I don't really agree with the pass coverage thing. I thought they did a pretty good job, honestly. And I was kind of worried about that going into it because, with this play action centric offense, I thought that's where maybe they were prone to giving up big plays because, this was the number one graded run defense in college football. I really did think that they were going to kind of contain Kenneth Walker, not let out big explosive runs. And next thing you know, letting off 3 20-plus yard touchdowns in a single game. And that's something Michigan allowed only one other time, in the 7 games before this one. And so those 3 key plays right there were huge and, deciding the outcome or, at least getting so close to the outcome there towards the end. As for Cade McNamara, like I said, it was a career day. Now, was it like an elite performance? I wouldn't, go as far to say it was an elite one at all whatsoever. He definitely did exceed my expectations, with his aggressiveness at times. He did have, some quarterback following completions downfield from a clean pocket. And we didn't think he was going to be the most accurate quarterback in the world. He kind of proved that here. That's why when you look at his grade on 10-plus yard throws, it doesn't go to that elite area of 90.0 and above. When typically when you see that, that's when a quarterback played pretty well. It was in that 70s range, which is fine. But then you also had some mistakes baked in there too. But at the end of the day, he did play his best football. I think there really wasn't one singular thing that you want to point the blame on. I saw a few different ones as well. Especially after that fumble, I had a lot of people chirping at me saying, "Oh, do you still want JJ in the game?" After that lost fumble. I don't think a 2-quarterback system interchanging him in the middle of the game, even though Gabe was a little dinged up, is the best route to ever go down. I think you got to stick with one guy, and I always thought they needed to make the hard pivot to JJ. But as we found out, that was more on Corum than anything. And it was more of like a I believe if I remember correctly, Harbaugh saying it was like a 1 in 10,000 type of play or something like that. And I completely agree. And that dude, and it looked like at the time, it was like, I'm pretty sure that's on Corum there. I'm seeing it live. And it turns out that's what it kind of was. But, at the end of the day, it was just kind of little minor things here and there, just all amounting everything that could have gone wrong in a few play stretch did. Whereas I don't think it was just one facet on either side of the ball that you can point to and say consistently this was the issue all throughout the game.
So with that in mind, I assume based off of all that, you're not concerned for Michigan's future here, because now you've got people who are confident, like, hey, they're going to bounce back. They're going to beat Indiana. They're going to beat Penn State. And then it's all going to come down to that Ohio State game. You've got people who are certainly more of the mindset of Indiana's play teams tough. They're going to lose this game. They're going to lose at Penn State. Maryland likes to throw the ball all over the place. And then Ohio State, you got some people who are in between. What are your thoughts about the future of Michigan with 4 games left?
Yeah, I'm sticking with my 10-win prediction at this point that I kind of pivoted to after seeing the first few games. The Indiana game, I would be absolutely shocked if they ended up losing that one. They're on their 3rd-string quarterback now at this point, true freshman Donovan McCulley. Going on the road, it's just I cannot see that Indiana Hoosiers offense that's been anemic really for a large portion of the year taking that next step and going up against this type of defense too. And let alone just a huge mismatch of, right there in the trenches for the Hoosiers, that offensive line. It's been a little bit better than it was last year, but it's still in the bottom tier of the Power 5 in the Big Ten, and that's one of the most potent pass rushes there. So it's going to be a tough matchup for them. Penn State, I do think that's an interesting game there. But, I think at the end of the day, I trust Michigan's defense to really kind of take advantage of the weaknesses that they have on the offensive side of the ball, specifically with quarterback Sean Clifford. Sean's been more of like the quarterback. He did get off to a little bit of a good start to the season. I thought that performance he had against Auburn might have been his best one of his entire career. It was quite clear in that one. The coaching staff recognized the limitations that he had. They won't feel, but after seeing him throughout the offseason and kind of looking back on him, they're like, we should probably take it easy on this one, and they did. He took good care of the football, throwing the short intermediate levels of the field. But after the last few games, we've kind of seen more of the true Sean Clifford, grading out in the 50s and the 60s. Not really being that difference maker type of quarterback and being more, a little bit more of an issue than a help. And so I think that I do think that they're going to take care of business there. And I think they're going to eventually get to that Ohio State game. I'm not going to say that they're going to beat Ohio State. I would, right now, I would still say Ohio State's going to win that game. But, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if they ended up finally pulling out the victory here. It just kind of all depends with Ohio State there, just because, what we saw from them this past week was not really the Ohio State that we saw the 3 weeks before that, where it looked like they were a different team. It looked like they were the team that everybody thought we were getting at the beginning of the year. CJ Stroud sat out week 4 against Akron, and then he strung together 3 league-graded performances, the highest graded quarterback in college football, very accurate with the football, playing with great timing there. And then against Penn State, everything just kind of fell flat. And I think a big part of that was the offensive line. We're talking like an offensive line that was, I believe it was the second highest graded one in the Power 5, arguably the best in all of college football when you incorporate all the other factors into their, scheme, situation, teams faced, offense by design, so on and so forth. And then against Penn State, they had, they already surpassed their, average pass block loss total in the first 2 quarters of that game alone. And they were also letting guys in the backfield against the run early. It just really was not a, cohesive performance at all whatsoever. CJ Stroud, he didn't perform at his best. The receiving unit didn't either. It was just kind of a weird performance for them, even though they did end up getting the 9-point victory at the end. They did have to get, a big play there from Travion Henderson. And of course, the big man touchdown there that he returned back for a score. And so, I think it's just all going to come down to what kind of growth does Ohio State show over the next few games? Because I feel like we already know what Michigan is. And that's still a really good football team. And I agree that, while, you look at the CFP rankings, they're sitting there at number 7. I wouldn't put them ahead of Oklahoma. But, I still think, placing him, in that top 8, I'm totally fine with, because I do think this is one of the best teams in college football. But, at the end of the day, I still think the biggest thing that would give them the best chance to beat Ohio State is to start JJ McCarthy. It's just because, again, people will go back like, oh, the few mistakes he had. But again, that touchdown throw he had, that's not one that, Cade can really make. What JJ has from an arm talent perspective, what he can do on the ground, just is significantly better. You have a wider range of positive outcomes. You do have a little bit lower, a lower range there as well. But the high end, the potential, that's what's going to get you over the hump and get you competitive with Ohio State. If they do kind of get back to what they were the few weeks before last week. And so I think, with that high ceiling that there is there, I think you got to roll with it, even though it's a little bit riskier there. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see kind of how everything transpires over the next few weeks. But as far as Michigan goes, I do think that they're going to take care of business over the next 3 games and sit there, 10-1 going in against the game with Ohio State.
Well, we're going to continue discussing some of the nuances in that exact light. And by the way, you echo what our friend Joel Klatt said on the podcast last week. He came on and said that he thinks that the Michigan couldn't have been 7-0 going into the Michigan State game without Cade McNamara being the starting quarterback, but he says they couldn't be 12-0. Now, granted, they won't be 12-0. But he said they wouldn't be able to get to 12-0 without J.J. McCarthy being the starting quarterback. So you echo the Fox Sports color commentator extraordinaire. But before we move on, I do have to mention a few things real quick. First off, got to tell you a little something about PrizePicks. Have you heard about it? PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this. I know you will too. PrizePicks is a leader in college sports daily fantasy. PrizePicks offers more college football props than anyone in the world and offers all the star players of the Power 5 as well as mid-major players you might not have ever even heard of. PrizePicks offers any prop you can think of, from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. Make your deposits. Use the promo code Locked On. Receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100. Just as I said, use that promo code Locked On. Pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on the projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected numbers. PrizePicks allows mixed sport entries. That means you can take the over on LeBron combined with the under on Mahomes in the same entry. Use the award-winning app, which you can get on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Entries can be made in up to 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals, so don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On, or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Also want to continue to talk about McDonald's. As I said, this episode of Locked On Wolverines is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. It's a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, a home team, or away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. Speaking of the Wi-Fi thing, I know that my ex-colleague, my intern, used to stop at McDonald's literally after every single home game and use their Wi-Fi. That's a true story. So whether it's you're coming after a Little League game, you're stopping at McDonald's after the Michigan-Indiana game, you're connecting to Wi-Fi when you get work done, you're going there for birthday parties. Lord knows I've been to many a birthday party in my youth at McDonald's. Any of those things. Or you could be grabbing McDonald's after a busy day when you're running late to something and need something delicious and dependable. That is the choice that you should make. So head to your local McDonald's, refuel and reconnect. I'm loving it. All right, Anthony, let's continue on this path that we have decided to take about Ohio State, because it's one of those things where I'm very curious, because I had completely bought in to everything that we had seen from Ohio State. I know we were 4 weeks away from that game, but I want to start looking forward a little bit, considering that I had predicted a giant win for Ohio State over Penn State. And some people have said to me, hey, that Penn State and Ohio State, it's always a close game. But looking at what Penn State's resume had been, I know they got the win over Auburn. That looks like a super quality win. Wisconsin is aging well as well. But it still kind of seemed to me that Penn State was not nearly in Ohio State's league at the moment. Ohio State had looked really good, but it was kind of, my thought was, against who have they done it? But I had kind of glossed over that until the Penn State game. But then now looking back, I'm like, all right, they've looked complete, but they've done it against the likes of Indiana, Rutgers, some of these other teams, but that aren't necessarily that good. How much do you feel that what we saw against Penn State might be more indicative of what the Buckeyes are? They go up against a tougher defense and they stall out a little bit. How much do you feel like it is just an aberration? Because the only other times that they kind of have looked like this was like against Oregon, for instance.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the output, it kind of was a little reminiscent of against Oregon and against Minnesota to open up the year, but for kind of different reasons. Because those first 2 weeks, I really do think that was mostly. I do think they got out coached that second game against Oregon. They really had no way to stop that RPO offense, and that's when the defensive, coaching changes started to come in. But I do think that quarterback CJ Stroud was a big issue early on. But like I said earlier, I mean, he just, after he sat out that Week 4 game against Akron, he looked like a completely different player. Now there was a rumored shoulder injury that he was, battling the first few weeks and then needed to rest it. How much that actually impacted his play, we really don't know. But I will say that, you look at him from an accuracy perspective, I mean, it was completely night and day. I mean, he was changing his uncatchable pass rate down the field over 15 percentage points in over a 3-week stretch, which is really, really rare to see. You did kind of see some tweaks within his mechanics, that could have been because of, he's making up for the shoulder that was hurting, or maybe the coaches recognized something. That either way, he did change something there. But this past game, I mean, like I alluded to earlier, it was pretty much everything on offense. Like, I don't think anybody really did their job to the best of their abilities, from start to finish. Now, I do think that towards the end of the game, they started to, get a little bit better. I thought the offensive line improved. I thought Travion Henderson, of course, And I do think that for the most part, though, that was just more of, I'm not really buying into it just because it just looked like an off night for everybody until they, kind of do this again. Then I'll start to be like, okay, maybe this Ohio State team is a little bit more vulnerable than a lot of us thought. As far as, Penn State's competitiveness, I'm not really sold on Penn State at all. So, I do think that this was more about Ohio State just having a completely off night, as opposed to Penn State playing them tough. And I do got to give them credit. Obviously you're in the game for the reason. But at the end of the day, I think it was more about Ohio State. So, that's why I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks here. I'm really trying to see, is this Ohio State team for real, right? Or are they not? Just because they've been, spotty and for different reasons at points in the season. So, it'll be interesting to see.
Now, with that in mind, like in your power rankings, you have Ohio State number 3, you have Michigan number 12, but in the actual grades, the analytics, they have Ohio State number 2, Michigan number 3. How close or how far apart do you feel, like, especially with that second one that I mentioned, the grade? Are they really that far apart? Are they closer than maybe people think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously Michigan has the advantage defensively, in my opinion. I think the big thing that kind of separates them is that even though Michigan's defense is better, offense still wins championships. Unless you, of course, you are Georgia, who's got, the rarest defense I've ever seen, all these physical freaks. Not every team has the benefit of having all these 5 stars that are going to be playing at the NFL at every single position across the board on defense. And so with that exception, offense still wins championships in Ohio State. I mean, they have the best receiving unit in college football. I still think they have one of the best offensive lines in college football. And, arguably as amazing as it is, Henderson, the true freshman back, I would say he's in the conversation for one of the best running backs in college football. And so I think that's what kind of separates Ohio State, but it's just all about that cohesiveness. And that's what I'm looking for with them, over the next few weeks to see if, Michigan actually has a shot, just because, like I mentioned earlier, there is some weaknesses within their offense, of course, at quarterback with Cade McNamara out there. He's not going to, he's not a liability, but he's not going to get you, he's not going to put the team on his back, him alone. And so I think that's what really kind of separates them. So from a grading perspective, I do think that Michigan, has a lot of talent there, and that's why you see them high in the grades. But ultimately, the offensive output, the offensive efficiency as a whole is why Ohio State's higher in that power ranking there. And, the scary part too is, I mean, this Ohio State team, not only this year, but looking over the next couple of years, and I know Michigan fans don't want to hear this, but this Ohio State team, they have unbelievable non-draft eligible talent. I mean, a few weeks ago, we did our, top 10 true freshmen, 3 of the 5 go to Ohio State. And, if, for some reason, they got to go to Quinn Ewers, if he sticks with the team, there were some rumors there. If he ends up being this guy that everybody has been touting him out to be as a recruit, that's going to be a very scary Ohio State team. They just really got to figure out the quarterback position. I mean, they have their 7th, wide receiver on the team, on the 3rd team, would be starting at almost every other Big Ten school. I mean, that's how talented they are. So, as far as this year goes, though, it's really that offensive output, the flashes that they've had is a big reason why that they're higher in that power ranking there. But, that's, from a talent perspective, kind of ignoring positional value, that's why they're a little bit more equal there in that grade.
Now, last one for you, because I've come away from last week with the hope that even if it is Cade McNamara, if Michigan can find a way to get the pass production, not necessarily the 400 yards like it got this last week, but, somewhere closer to that than 150, 200, and can get the running game going at the same time, then certainly it can do some things against a team like Ohio State. They're going to need that type of production, right? They're going to need 300 through the air and 200 on the ground in order to beat Ohio State. There's no way about that. But how encouraged were you at seeing Andrell Anthony and his performance? And I'll add Eric All to that and what he was able to do. How did they grade out in your eyes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of mad at myself for not even mentioning them up until this point and talking about them, because I was, very impressed with what they did in that game. I mean, constantly they just kept popping up, and it's like, they're showing up when they need to be, right? Because, you're especially early on in the season when you saw Ronnie Bell go down, you were very, myself included, everybody was concerned, like, who do we really have there? But of course, like you said, Andrell Anthony, Eric Hall, they were, some of the highest graded players that Michigan had on the day there. Both sporting 75 PFF grades, really for the game. Above that, Eric Hall being the highest graded player on offense there. I mean, those are reasons to be encouraged, having these players really step up and shine. And that's what's really going to help you get that, offensive output. But I do think at the end of the day, going back to the main theme that I've kind of been preaching, not just today, but really, I think every single time I really joined, you got to put JJ out there with these guys to really maximize your offensive output, or at least the potential of your offensive output to get, to that level, the efficiency level that's going to be required to go drive for drive with Ohio State. But at the end of the day, they also needed some playmakers to step up, and we saw that happen there. Like you said, with Eric Hall and Andrell Anthony.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. People will probably think that I disagree with it because I've been on very much on the Cade train, but I've been on the Cade train because there's been no reason in the games that they've played to make a holistic switch. And I'm not saying that that Michigan needs to make a permanent switch just yet. I'm just saying when it comes to that Ohio State game, it's good to get him ready. That said, I was also with you on the idea of Cade's balling out against Michigan State. What are you doing putting JJ in? And, again, we heard about Cade being in the medical tent. That changed things a little bit. But nonetheless, it was in a game like that, when you have a guy that's doing what he was doing, I thought that Michigan was begging for disaster by kind of getting a little too cute with the two different guys going in. But anyway.
Yeah, right. I did send out a tweet after that touchdown throw JJ had. I was like, man, you got to keep this guy in here just because it gets you the whole thing there. But again, like now we're in agreement with this, just the 2-quarterback system. Yeah, I really do think it can just mess up with the offense, the continuity there. So I do think that, if they're going to make a pivot, and I think they should, it's just, you go all in, with one guy, hopefully that being JJ, in my opinion. And I think that's going to really maximize your overall output, or else you're going to get those, those sloppy mistakes here and there by taking guys in and out. And so,
yeah, I'll be curious to see what happens as far as that's concerned. But Anthony Treash, thank you for joining as always, man. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Of course. Thank you for having me back on.
Anthony Treash from PFF. So always glad to have him. Great insights. If you're still on the ledge, get off the ledge, Michigan fans. It's Michigan again, rated 3 in Pro Football Focus overall score, rated 12 in the power rankings. Keeping in mind other things, Ohio State when they won the national championship in 2014, they had one loss. It was to Virginia Tech, unranked Virginia Tech. They were ranked 14th in the initial college football playoff rankings. Things can happen. You can grow in 4 games. We've seen this. We've seen Michigan get better, at least in the 3 games leading up to Ohio State. 2019, that happened. I mean, let's talk about that on the other end, because that's the important thing, is getting to it that way. But first, I got to tell you a little something about Built Bar. Y'all know how much I love Built Bar. If you don't know what Built Bar is, it's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It is high protein, low calorie, low carb. I just bought another box this morning of my favorite peanut butter brownie. I'm super excited. I want it here right now because I still had a couple blueberry muffins left, which was a special one. But they've got so many great flavors. Again, peanut butter brownie is my favorite, but they got the almond coconut. They've got cookies and cream. I almost bought also a box of cookies and cream. They have a mystery flavor right now where you can win a prize if you go and try and you order it, you send it. You eat it, you figure out what it is, you go on Instagram, you tell them what it is, and if you're right, there's multiple different prizes. One of them's worth $500, and you get I think you get a Peloton bike as well, and a bunch of other stuff. So really good stuff. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. That's built.com, promo code LOCKED15, like I did this morning, to get 15% off of your next order of Built Bar. All right. Guess what? BetOnline.ag is back and better than ever. It's got a new web interface for the start of basketball season, even more props and odds and lines more than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season, so head over to their new updated desktop or mobile website. Sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit using the promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason, which I guess that's new now, but Atlanta Braves, my childhood team, along with the Detroit Tigers, since I used to go to Atlanta Braves games as a kid. NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online, not your online sportsbook experts. I mean, they are, but BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so as I just alluded to before, I was starting to get carried away with a third segment before we needed to actually have it. The thing is, and for also I want to point out, remember how many times I told you about home field and I had all these shirts coming? I'm wearing my LSU shirt today, right? Straight away, the LSU shirt. I don't even think this one's my favorite. It's close. I don't think it's necessarily my favorite. I like this one, but there's a lot of good designs that they have. Like I told you, I got Georgia, I got Florida, I was going to wear the Florida one. I got the Miami one, the Oklahoma State one, and I got the one other one. I got another one in there. I just can't remember what. But nonetheless, keeping in mind, there's still a lot of season left to play here. We've seen Michigan teams look really good in the last couple games. Certainly, you think about, people talk about like how Jake Rudock was the best quarterback that Michigan has had in the Harbaugh era. I see that constantly. I'm curious if I can look this up real fast, since this is spur of the moment. This is me thinking about it and coming up with it. But now I believe he had the number 2 passing season for Michigan with 3,017 yards. I think that's the number. Now, Shea Patterson was 3061 in 2019. 2018 he was 2600. So Shea Patterson passed him on the rankings there. But when you look at Jake Rudock in a game log situation, he had some good games here and there, but for everyone that was like, yeah, he was great, he was amazing, I want to run through what he was throwing for on a weekly basis. Now, he did throw for 279 yards in the first game of the season, the loss to Utah, but he threw 3 interceptions. In the next 7 games, this is what Jake Rudock's point total or yardage total was in every game. 180 with 1 interception, no touchdowns. 123, 194, 180, 179, 168, and 140. And granted, that 140 he was injured. That was against Minnesota. But a couple of those games against BYU, 56% completions. Against Maryland, 50% completions. What people think of when they think of, man, Jake Rudock was so good, were those next 4 games, and really the next 3 games, and then the bowl game. Because in those next 4 games, threw for 72% for 337 yards against Rutgers. Threw for 440 yards for 71.7% against Indiana. Granted, that was double overtime or triple overtime, one of the two, I can't remember. He threw for 256 yards and 65.8% against Penn State. He threw for 263 yards at 59.4% against Ohio State. And then he threw for 278 yards against Florida. So once they got to week 8 or week 9 or whatever you want to call it, once they went and got into the 9th game forward, that is when he took his step forward the most. Now, you have other instances where maybe the quarterbacks, don't want to say regress, because you look at Wilton Speight. Wilton Speight was just kind of jamming out a little bit here. You got into that 9th game, goes up against Maryland, throws for 362 yards, had the best first half of any Michigan quarterback in history, and then only 103 yards against Iowa, injured in that game, and then it went downhill. So that also happens. But so the narrative it's kind of flipped, right, depending on when you turn on, because with Wilton Spate, for instance, he threw 312 yards against UCF. He threw for 253 against Illinois, 244 against Michigan State. He was having some pretty good games. I mean, some games they didn't really need him that much. You look at Penn State, 189 yards passing, but I mean, they didn't even need a heck of a lot there. They won 49-10. They were just clowning people that year. Shea Patterson, I do want to touch on him. Let's go to 2019 and look at his what he was doing. He was a lot more consistent for the most part, even though he was injured. We kind of started in week 4 against Rutgers with 276 yards. Well, that was week 5 technically, but didn't have some good games as far as like production. 147 yards against Iowa, 194 against Illinois. Then started to turn on against Penn State, 276. Only 100 yards in the rain game against Notre Dame, but they threw it 12 times. 151 against Maryland. He was sick that game. But then those last three of the last 3 games of the regular season, 384, 366, 305. So, and then even when you look at 2018, I mean, it was a little bit more consistent, all mostly in the 200s. I mean, there's some 100 and something games, but what I'm trying to say here is the story on everything isn't written, because wow, I have the hiccups now suddenly. You look at Jake Rudock and people say he was the best that they've had at quarterback at Michigan in the Jim Harbaugh era, but he did nothing at all until the last 4 games of the season, really. So a season's more than that, right? And you keep in mind that year they lost to Michigan State and Ohio State. But people looked at that season a little bit more happy because it felt like it was a sign of things to come. You're willing to give him. He's the only one that really hasn't had anyone breathing down his neck, because people are willing to give him a little bit more time. Now, that said, I agree with the idea you need maybe that higher end talent against Ohio State. But heck, even Cade can grow in these last couple games. And a lot of people say, well, quarterback is who they are. Jake Rudock was a 5th year, right? He was a 5th year guy. And yet he really came on at the end of the season. So I'm not going to write off Cade McNamara. We could see him suddenly get that boost of like, all right, because we saw it with Jake Rudock, right? We saw it's like, all right, I can sling it. I can throw for 300 and something yards. Cool. We'll see what happens down the stretch. I would imagine Michigan's going to stay relatively pass happy now that that's been a part of it. I think it needs to, but I mean, it needs to find a way to run the ball effectively as well. I want to see them run the ball effectively, get 200 yards on the ground, and pass the ball more like we saw them do against Michigan State. All right. Tomorrow's the mailbag. I need to put out a call for questions, so we will do that. But thank you for watching and or listening. We'll be back on Thursday with the Michigan mailbag. We'll talk to you then. Peace.